Welcome to Mark Gibson's Human Rights Channel, accountant with designations CPA, MBA, CMA, ACPA, ASA, Australia. Enjoy learning!
So let's go now to the statement of financial position. Saan ako? Dito na ako sila. Statement of financial position, it is a formal statement showing the three elements comprising financial position, namely assets, liabilities, and equity. It used to evaluate factors like liquidity. So when we say liquidity, this is the ability of the entity to pay its short-term loans or obligations. Solvency, this is the ability of the entity to pay long-term obligations. And thirdly, the need of the entity for additional financing. Now, in preparation for the statement of financial position, we have the report form. So basically, it's in vertical order. So kung napansin mo, in the left side are your assets, and in the right side naman are your liabilities and owner's equity. No, so also we have the horizontal order or the account form. No, so basically it's just showing all the three main categories in a horizontal order. So that's report form and account form. Now, current and non-current distinction. No, so past one, paragraph 60 provides that an entity shall present current and non-current assets and current and non-current liabilities as separate classifications in the statement of financial position. O class, if you've taken up basic accounting prior to January 2020, then you have to revisit the latest conceptual framework kasi nagbago siya beginning January 2020. No? So meaning, kung tinake up mo yung basic accounting mo prior to 2020, gaya nga ng sabi ko sa'yo, I highly encourage all of you to revisit your conceptual framework because there are a number of concepts there that were revised in the new release of the conceptual framework. Ano bang use ng conceptual framework? No? Basically, class, conceptual framework, this serves as guidelines in order to prepare the financial statements. No? Of course, if there's a conflict between accounting standards and conceptual framework, the accounting standards will prevail. No? So parang ang conceptual framework is general guidelines to aid us in preparing the financial statements. No? So yun yung generic guidelines in cases when there are no clear accounting standards in place. No? So yun lang naman ang use nun. Pero that's, I mean, it's good for you to revisit those, I mean, the revised conceptual framework. No? So ito, gaya nito, assets. The revised conceptual framework defines an asset as a present economic resource controlled by the entity as a result of past events. Ito na yung bagong definition ng asset. No? So again, just check your reference material from your basic accounting. Ano yung, kung may libro ka dyan natago, ano yung definition ng asset before, no? Because this is the new and the revised definition of an asset. So what is an economic resource? It is a right that has the potential to produce economic benefits, no? So the essential characteristics of an asset are, it must be controlled by the entity, it is a result of past event, and it has the potential to produce economic benefits. Kasi I remember the old definition includes probable benefit of the asset. So wala na yun. Kailangan na ngayon, there's a present economic resource. And the economic resource is basically the right that has the potential to produce economic benefits. So what are classified as current assets? So current assets are presented if it meets any of the following criteria. So meaning, isa lang dyan na criterion, it will fall under current assets na. So ganun siya, no? So number 1, cash or cash equivalent unless the asset is restricted to settle a liability for more than 12 months after the reporting period. So meaning, cash or cash equivalent is considered current assets unless nga daw if it's set aside to pay liability or long-term liability, no? So next, the entity hold the asset primarily for the purpose of trading. Ito yung mga assets held for trading natin. Next, the entity expects to realize the asset within 12 months after the reporting period. No? So I think the key item here would be the phrase within 12 months after the reporting period. And then finally, the entity expects to realize the asset or intends to sell or consume it within the entity's normal operating cycle. Ano ba yung pinag-usapan nating operating cycle? It's the time between the acquisition of assets for processing and their realization in cash or cash equivalents. No? So that's the operating cycle. So sabi natin, if the assets is intended to be sold or consumed within the normal operating cycle, then it is classified as current assets. Ngayon, ano yung mga non-current assets? So simply, kung hindi nag-qualify dito sa mga criteria that we just discussed, and then we have to classify it as non-current asset. So ganun siya kasimple. Now, let's go to liabilities. Liabilities define, the revised conceptual framework defines a liability as a present obligation of an entity to transfer an economic resource as a result of past events. No? So the entity has an obligation. The obligation is to transfer an economic resource. Again, the economic resource, ito yung right, no? Right by the entity. No? And finally, liability arises from the past events. Okay? So, paano naman natin malalaman kung dapat current liabilities? So, sabi, there are, again, 4 criteria here to help us when to classify a liability as to current or non-current. So, sabi, if it meets any of the following, so kahit isa lang dyan, it will fall under current liabilities. So ano yun? Number 1, the entity expects to settle the liability within the entity's normal operating cycle. So meaning it's within the normal course of business. Number 2, the entity holds the liabilities for purpose of trading. Okay. And the number 3, liability is due to be settled within 12 months after the reporting period, kaya current siya. And then finally, the entity does not have an unconditional right to defer the settlement of the liability for at least 12 months after the reporting period. So meaning, wala kang capacity to defer the payment. So paano ba yan? For example, ako may utang kay Shella na lang. So ako ba, do I have unconditional right? So parang ganito, no? So walang pwedeng gawin si Shella, hindi siya pwede makapag-demand ng payment from myself. In that case, kung meron ng unconditional right, then we don't need to classify it as current liabilities kasi nga because of the conditional right, nagiging non-current siya. No? So again, if it doesn't meet any of these criteria, then it will fall under non-current liability. Okay, so paano naman itong refinancing? So refinancing of currently maturing obligation. currently maturing obligation, so meaning ito na yung magma-mature na. So meaning it will become due within, say, within the next few months, no? So less than 12 months. So ang sabi, generally, it should be classified as current liability except when there is refinancing. Paano ba ginagawa yung refinancing? So parang ganito lang yan. Usually, kung may loan ka, ang ginagawa mo is hindi ka pa bayad, pwede ka na magkaroon ng refinancing. So meaning, ginagamit mo na yung loan mo, pwede ka na tawag ba dito? Renew, no? Pwede mo na mag-renew ng loan. Ang gagawin lang doon is babayaran yung existing loan mo and then magkakaroon ka ng top-up na tinatawag. So, refinancing can be done in two ways. Number one, extension of maturity date. No? So, instead of paying it, say, in the next 3 months, in-extend. No? So, next, entering a borrowing transaction and proceeds of which will be used to settle the maturing obligation. So, meron tayo ditong test, no? Sabi, with existing right as of balance sheet date to defer settlement at least 12 months from balance sheet date. Kung ang sagot mo dyan is yes, then it's non-current liability. If it's not, then tignan pa natin yung next question. Is refinancing completed on or before balance sheet date? If the answer is yes, it's non-current liability. And if the answer is no, it must be presented as current liability. No? So ito lang, para lang at least meron kang guide on how to approach problems around refinancing. Next, we have breach of covenant. Ano ba yung covenant? Ito yung mga conditions, agreements natin, no? So parang ganito yan. For example, ako, gusto ko mangutang kay Mark. So sabi lang ni Mark, sige, Mark, pares pala kami Mark. Sige, Mark Gibson, pautangin kita provided dapat yung cash balance mo will not go below 1 million. Paano kung halimbawa by end of year, ang cash balance ko naging 500,000 lang. So that's a breach of the condition of the loan. So therefore, generally, the loan will become due and demandable and should be presented as current liability. Pero again, may exception. So, paano yung exception? If the creditor gives grace period not to collect at least 12 months from the balance sheet date. So parang ganito, no? Sabi ni Mark, sige, Mark Gibson, friends naman tayo, sige, I'll give you grace period. Grace period simply is, ito parang yung, parang pinagbibigyan ka, sige, wag ka muna magbayad, naiintindihan ko yung sitwasyon, parang ganun, no? And number two, grace period was given on or before the balance sheet date. Ano nga yung mga guidelines natin? So let's go to this flow chart, no? With grace period not to collect at least 12 months from balance sheet date, if the answer is no, it's current liability. If the answer is yes, then we have to ask if the grace period provided on or before balance sheet date. If the answer is no, it's current liability. Pero if yes, it's non-current liability. So parang ang tinitingnan pa rin dito, class, is yung length ng grace period and yung timing ng pagbigay ng grace period. Kasi kung halimbawa si Mark, very generous, binigyan ako ng chance na magbayad in more than 12 months, non-current pa rin siya. No? Pero kung binigay niya lang sa akin is 3 months, and then within the next 12 months, ito ano siya, current liability. No? So that's breach of covenant. Okay, so let's apply the concept by way of solving a number of discussion problems. Let me share you the Excel file. So problem 1. So problem 1, let me read the requirement. The requirement is what amount should be reported as total current liabilities. The Piolo Company provided the following information on December 31, 2021. So you have the accounts payable. May naka-note your internet connection is unstable. I hope you can still hear me okay. You have your accounts payable, accrued expenses, bonds payable, premium on bonds payable, deferred tax liability, income tax payable, cash dividend payable, share dividend payable, and notes payable. Pag-usapan natin isa-isa, paano natin i-categorize yan. No? So, ang gawin ko, copy ko na lang itong problem 1, and then I put it here. Okay. Sinulat ko na siya dito isa-isa para at least mas madali natin siya ma-analyze. No? So accounts payable, of course, accounts payable is current liability because this is an obligation within the normal course of business. So okay na tayo dyan. Ayoko ng orange. Ayan na lang. Next, accrued expenses, still a current liability. Bonds payable, alam mo naman pag bonds payable and also yung premium on bonds payable, itong premium is related to the bonds payable and bonds payable is non-current liability. Okay. Ayan. Deferred tax liability naman class, this is always categorized as non-current liability. So wala tayong problema dyan. Pag-usapan natin tong income tax payable, it's current liability because this is due and demandable within the period. No? Cash dividends payable, it's current liability. Correct? Pero itong class share dividend. Remember, ang share dividend is dividend payable in the shares of the company. So therefore, this share dividend is classified as equity. And finally, notes payable. Tandaan, this information are available. This information is made available on December 31, 2021. Dahil December 31, 2021 yan, and the notes payable will become due on March 1, 2022, which is within 12 months from the balance sheet date. So therefore, we have to classify this notes payable as current liability. Okay, so add lang natin lahat ng current liability and our answer is 6 million. No? So 6 million is our answer to discussion problem number 1. Now let's have problem number 2. What total amount of current assets should be reported on December 31, 2021? So again, this time, ang tinatanong naman sa atin is current assets. No? Piolo Company reported the following current assets as of December 31, 2021. So cash, including 1 million sinking fund and 500,000 value-added tax fund of 5 million. Accounts receivable of 2 million, inventory, including goods received on consignment, 200,000, for 800,000 pesos in total. Equity investment at fair value in profit and loss, 3 million. Equity investment at fair value, OCI's other comprehensive income, 1.5 million. You have deferred tax assets of 550,000 and deposit made on inventory to be delivered in 18 months for 150,000. Pag-usapan natin yung problem number 2. Dito tayo ngayon sa Excel file. Saysay natin siya, class. Okay. So, yung accounts receivable mo ay cash muna tayo. So, yung cash class, value-added tax fund, eh, syempre dahil nga value-added tax yan, alam mo naman ng VAT is being paid on a monthly basis. No? While itong sinking fund, basically class, this is long-term liabilities. No? So, this is cash set aside to pay for a long-term liability. So, therefore, we have to deduct it from the cash balance. No? So, current asset is 4 million lang. Pag-usapan naman natin accounts receivable, parang wala na palang dapat pag-usapan dito. No? Since this is accounts receivable, this is current asset. Itong inventory. Inventory including goods received on consignment. No? So take note class, if it's on consignment, kailangan natin malaman sino ba yung consignor and sino yung consignee. So in this case, consignee tayo. So sa Piolo is the consignee. So meaning, hindi talaga siya yung owner noong inventory na yun. So nakikilagay lang siya dun sa shop natin. No? So therefore, to get the correct inventory balance, we have to deduct the inventory on consignment. So that's 200,000. So inventory balance should be 600,000 pesos only. Pag-usapan natin itong equity investment. No? So equity investment, pag sinabi nating FBPL, these are held for trading. So meaning we get this for the purpose of selling this back. Now, on a monthly basis, we are translating this in its fair value. Any difference is booked to your profit and loss statement. No? So therefore, this is considered as current asset. Paano naman yung equity investment at FVOCI? So class, these are equity investment held not for trading. No? So these are non-current asset where fair value is recognized in the other comprehensive income. Okay, so therefore this is not a current asset. Of course, deferred tax asset is non-current asset. Ito namang next, deposit made on inventory. While this is inventory related, advance payment. No? So we classified this as a deferred charge. And since the delivery will happen 18 months, so that's beyond 12 months, no, from the balance sheet date, and therefore we will classify it as non-current asset. So we have to add this, no? So 4 million, 2 million, 600, and 3 million. So that's 9.6 million. That's the answer to question number 2. No? So that's the total current assets of 9.6 million. Okay. So, saan ba ito pwede lagay? Okay. So let's now go to discussion problem number 3. Ang tinatanong lang sa atin, what total amount should be reported as current assets and current liabilities? Isa-isay natin siya. Let's have discussion problem number 3. Piolo Incorporated provided the following trial balance. So on December 31, 2021, we have cash overdraft, your AR, inventory, prepaid expenses, land held for resale, PPE, accounts payable, share capital, share premium, and retained earnings. Pero tandaan, meron kasi mga additional information made available below. No? So sabi, checks amounting to 600,000 pesos were written to vendors. So meaning, ito yung babayad natin sa mga suppliers natin. It was recorded on December 31, 2021. So nagawa na yung cheque, na-record na yung pertinent journal entries on December 31, 2021, resulting in cash overdraft. No? So ibig sabihin, nung pagka-record ng cheque, nilagay na rin yung entries, kaya nagkaroon pala ng overdraft. No? So meaning, nag-negative yung cash natin. No? Pero, yung cheque pala, na-email pa noong January 15, 2022. So, doon lang muna tayo. So, kung sa adjusting entry natin, ito yung mga tinatawag na outstanding checks, di ba? Sa bank recon, no? So, kung meron kang outstanding checks, ito yung mga reconciling items natin, no? So, paano dapat na-approach sa problem number 3? Let's have problem number 3. Okay. So, yung cash natin, it's 400,000. Simply, 600,000 less 200,000 na overdraft. Kasi nga, hindi pa naman talaga natin naibayad. So, wag mo munang i-deduct sa cash mo yung check na yon. No? Remember, the checks were mailed on January 15, which is beyond the balance sheet date. Okay? Ang tinatanong sa atin, current assets, no? Wala namang other information on AR. So, i-plot na natin siya. Inventory of 1.2 million. Prepaid expense of 200,000. Ngayon, pag-usapan natin itong land held for resale. Sabi dyan, 2 million. Land held for resale was sold for cash on January 31, 2022. Ito class, while this is property, plant, and equipment, kino-consider natin siya as current asset because this was held with the intention of reselling it. So, binili natin siya para ibenta. So, that's why we're classifying it as current asset. So, total current asset is 4.5 million. So, that's the answer to question number 1. Now, pag-usapan natin yung current liabilities. Isa lang naman ang current liability account na meron tayo. We have accounts payable of 700,000. Pero remember, there's a check, no, amounting to 600,000. Dahil nga hindi pa siya na-mail, hindi pa naipadala until January 15. So at December 31, 2021, we have to adjust our entries. No? So we have to add it back to our accounts payable. So that's 600,000. The answer to question number 2 is 1.3 million. So 700,000, the AP balance, plus the checks not yet mailed, no, as of December 31, 2021. So that's 1.3 million. Okay, so let's have problem number 4. So in problem number 4, ang tinatanong sa atin, what amount should be reported as total current assets? So Piolo Corporation provided the following unadjusted balances at year-end. So during the current year, estimated tax payments of 600,000 were charged to prepaid taxes. The entity has not yet recorded income taxes, tax expenses. There were no differences between financial income and taxable income, and the tax rate is 25%. Included in the accounts receivable is 500,000 pesos due from a customer. Special terms granted to this customer require payment in equal semi-annual installments of 125,000 pesos every April 1 and October 1. What amount should be reported as total current assets? So, yan. Isa-isa natin tong problem number 4. Sige. Ang tinatanong sa atin na current assets. So, unahin muna natin yung, syempre, yung mga related, ano ba yung mga assets involved? No? So, we have cash, accounts receivable, prepaid taxes. Pero out of these 3, ano ba yung meron mga complexity or ano ba yung may mga other information involved? Unahin natin si prepaid tax. Sabi sa prepaid tax, estimated tax payment of 600,000 were charged to prepaid taxes. So yun pala yun. Saan nanggaling to? No? So doon sa estimate of prepaid taxes. So okay tayo dito, na-identify natin to. Pero ano pa yung sinasabi? the entity has not yet recorded income tax expense. So meaning, nag-set up tayo ng prepaid tax, pero at this point, wala pa talaga pala tayong binabayarang tax expense. So in that case, let's compute how much would be the income tax expense. So you have the revenue given, less the expenses of 2.6 given. So meron ka ngayong income, taxable income of, lagay ko dito, taxable income of 1 million. And the tax rate now is 25%. So you have now your income tax expense of 250,000. So you have set up the prepaid tax at 600,000. Of course, we have to do our adjusting entries na, no? So less the income tax payable of 250,000, the correct or the adjusted prepaid tax expense is 350,000. Next, punta natin yung AR. Yung AR natin, 1,650,000. Pero part daw ng 1,650,000, sabi yan, included in AR is 500,000 due from a customer. Pero meron pala tayong special terms. Paano yung special terms? Granted to this customer require payment in equal semi-annual installments. So meron palang installment, 125 every April 1 and October 1. So therefore, we have to split that. No? So between current AR and non-current. So the first 250,000 should form part of the AR, but the other half should form part of your non-current asset. So therefore, 1,650,000 less 250,000. So the adjusted AR balance would be 1,400,000. Now there is no other information given for cash. So therefore, cash balance is 850,000. Now we just have to add the 3. So 350 plus 1.4 million plus 850,000. So the current assets balance as of December 31 would be 2,600,000. So that's the answer to discussion problem 4. Sige. So that's problem 4. Let's go now to problem 5. So ito, para at least mas maintindihan yung concept naman ng notes payable, let's have an example on notes payable. So what amount of the notes payable should be classified as current, no? So ito, ang labanan lang dito, class, tingnan lang natin yung maturity period, no? So sabi, Piono Incorporated reported the following liability balances on December 31, 2021. So meron daw 10% notes payable issued on October 1, 2020, maturing October 1, 2022 for 2 million pesos. 12% notes payable issued on March 1, 2020, maturing on March 1, 2022 for 4 million. And meron pang other pertinent information, sabi, under the loan agreement, on December 31, 2021, the entity has an existing right to defer settlement of the 10% notes payable for at least 12 months after December 31, 2021. On March 1, 2022, the entire 4 million balance of the 12% notes payable was refinanced through issuance of long-term obligation payable lump sum. The 2021 financial statements were issued on March 31, 2022. So let's have problem 5. Actually, class, ito naman, yung 2 million, since there is between 10 million na notes payable, there is an existing right to defer for at least 12 months. So we classify it as non-current liability. Now, on the other hand, yung 12% notes payable naman will be refinanced, no? And it happened after the balance sheet date. So therefore, ang tinatanong sa atin dito is how much should be reported as current liability. So the answer is 4 million. 4 million pesos. So meaning ito lang, no, yung 12% notes payable issued on March 1, 2020. Okay? So that's discussion problem number 5. Pag-usapan ngayon natin, bago tayo mag-proceed sa discussion problem 6, yung subsequent events. Subsequent events, kailan siya nagiging adjusting events, kailan siya non-adjusting events. So if the event has a pre-existing condition before the balance sheet date and it actually occurred, then we have to adjust it. If the event has a pre-existing condition but not available at balance sheet date, hindi na natin kailangan siyang i-adjust. Para lang at least siguro mas ma-appreciate pa yung ibig sabihin niyan. Ano ba yung mga examples of adjusting events? So number 1, events that indicate that the going concern assumption in relation to the whole or part of the entity is not appropriate. So part of disclosure requirement is yung going concern assumption. So meaning that the entity will live, has the capacity to continue its operation. So number 2, settlement after the reporting date of court cases that confirm that the entity had a present obligation at reporting date. So simply, kung meron pa daw mga litigation, syempre, yung mga litigation naman, even prior to the balance sheet date, alam mo na yan. But when there is settlement involved, then we have to adjust for it. Number 3, receipt of information after the reporting date indicating that an asset was impaired at reporting date. So that's self-explanatory. Number 4, bankruptcy of a customer. So especially if it involves trade receivables. So paano yan? Meron kang customer, you have receivable from that customer and that customer become insolvent or that customer files for bankruptcy. So therefore, you have to adjust your books, So you have to provide for bad debt accounts. Sales of inventory after reporting date that give evidence about their net realizable value at reporting date. So if there's a changes in the net realizable value, then it's an adjusting event. Discovery of frauds or errors that show financial statements are incorrect. Well, that's basic, So we have to adjust it. Now, what are the examples of non-adjusting events? Ang tip lang dito, class, if you find the word major, usually that's non-adjusting events. Major business combination, major purchase or disposal of assets, destruction of major production plant, announcing a plan to discontinue operations. So this qualify only as disclosure. So we don't really need to adjust our books. We only have to disclose it as part of notes to financial statement. Oops, ba't ganun? Wala yung problem. Dapat may problem ako dyan. Okay. So discussion problem 6. Wala doon. Skip. So discussion problem 6. What total amount should be reported as adjusting events? So of the 3, ano daw dyan yung adjusting events? So number 1, the entity had equity investment held for trading. On December 31, 2021, these investments were recorded at fair value. During the period up to Feb 15, 2022, there was a steady decline in the fair value of the shares in portfolio, and on Feb 15, 2022, the fair value had fallen to 2 million pesos. So this one is a non-adjusting entry because these are held for trading. Number 2, the entity had reported contingent liability on December 31, 2021, which the entity was the defendant. The case was not heard until the first week of Feb 2022. On March 1, 2022, the judge handed down the decision against the entity and determined that the entity was liable to pay damages and costs totaling 3 million pesos. O class, ito, this is an adjusting event, no? So we record it at 3 million. Number 3, on December 31, 2021, the entity had account receivable from large customer in the amount of 4 million. On March 15, the entity was advised in writing by the liquidator of the said customer that the customer was insolvent and that only 10% of the accounts receivable will be paid. So, yung 4 million, 10% na lang daw ang mababayad dun. So, 3.6 million will form part of adjusting events. No? So, the total is 6,600,000. So, yung dalawa lang. No? So, that's the amount to be reported as adjusting event on December 31, 2021. And actually, that ends our discussion on statement of financial position.
This has been your instructor, Mark Gibson. Thank you for learning with us. See you in our next discussion. Don't forget to like and subscribe. See ya!